I just looked at these four very frugal 50mm prime lenses side by side to see if they kind of fill a need or something that I'm looking for, and that is basically prime lenses that have vintage look, vintage flair, but without all the vintage headaches. Meaning, of course, when you start looking at old lenses, you generally have to go through a bunch of them to get a couple of decent ones, and then you have to modify them. Going to a mount that you want to work with, whether it's EF or E-mount or L-mount or any other mount. Adding, of course, the gears, the focus, potentially iris gears, declicking the iris, and putting on a common front. That's what we typically do when we syn mod old lenses. Now, again, all these lenses were under $500. They were between $198 and $500. And, really had hoped to find a little gem amongst these. Now, I think they all have potential, and they all certainly work. I mean, there's nothing completely wrong with these lenses, but I basically have chosen to keep looking. And the reason is, let's go through them one by one. Okay, with this SLR Magic Syn 2 50mm f1.1 in E-mount. This was actually a really interesting lens. The biggest drawback for this lens for me is the fact that it displayed a fair amount of image shift. And that, of course, is when you're racking focus, going back and forth, the image will move around. Now, this one did a vertical motion. Some lenses go side by side, but this particular example displayed a fair amount of image shift. And to me, that's very distracting. It's much worse than focus breathing. But it was disappointing because of that. Now, SLR Magic's Micro Prime series, I actually had really high hopes for this lens because, as you can see, it certainly feels and looks like a cinema lens. It has witness marks on both sides of the barrel, native E-mount, focus gear, and iris gear in the proper 0.8 module. Now, and also a nice front. Of these four lenses, optically, this one performed the worst. And I think in my review, I mentioned a couple of times that I think I probably have a bad example, and I'm just going back to some of the online reviews that I've read about this lens, and that is, some people complain about the quality control and how they have to go through a couple lenses to find a decent one, and that's just kind of an unfortunate thing because, again, I had high hopes for this lens and this series of lens. So optically, I thought this one did the worst out of all four. Now, the Samyang Rokinon series, 50mm t1.5. Many of you watching this video are going to be familiar with these lenses because they have been around forever, and they are really kind of the first, really inexpensive, motion-oriented or cinema-oriented manual focus lens. That's also new. Now, these have a plastic construction, and that doesn't really bother me because I had this lens for a number of years, and of course we don't use it on every shoot, but it's still together and still works fine. Now, in terms of looks, with these lenses, the Rokinon Samyang series, I find I'm very neutral towards the look of it because it is, to me, a contemporary look. It does have a fair amount of compromises to it, some defects that maybe are not the most pleasing to me, and I'm probably just a little bored with the look, to be honest. So it's not like a full vintage look. It's a contemporary look, but it's not nearly as optically clean and perfect as a true cinema lens. And, that's the Samyang series. But they are around. They're all over the place, actually. And again, right now, $4.99 on B&H. Of these four lenses, Sony's $198 50mm FE f1.8. Optically, I think this actually performed the best. The look is very contemporary, as you can imagine. It's an autofocus lens from Sony. The body is plastic, fly-by-wire focus, so not ideal for filmmaking. But, Sony, the a7S III, the new touch to focus, the focus tracking, the eye detection, they all work. It works phenomenally well. And for this reason, I'm actually really kind of hoping to find a autofocus capable lens that has an interesting look or has a aesthetically pleasing look. Now, I don't think this lens looks bad. Again, optically, it was probably the most correct or most contemporary of all four lenses. Maybe not crazy about the look, but it does want me to take a look at Sony's GM series of lenses. Now, of course, they are about 5 times the cost of this lens, or actually 6 times the cost of this lens. But if they can have, an interesting look and have great autofocus and have a reasonable manual focus override, that would be an interesting lens. A bit more than I want to expand, of course, but it does have autofocus. So I think at this point, I'm going to continue the search. I will probably look at true vintage lenses. There's just so many to look at. There's, of course, Leica Rs, there's Contact Yashica, there's Zeiss Contact Yashica, there's Nikkors, the old Nikons, there's Canon FD, there's the Olympus, Zuiko lenses, of course, there's Pentax, the Takamura, Super Takamaras. Those are all worth a look, and of course, possibly some medium format lenses like the Mamiya 645 series of manual focus lenses. So it's a lot to take a look at, but I'll probably start by looking the next tier up in terms of new cinema glass lenses that cost, right about $1,200 a piece. That is a bit more than I want to spend right now, but considering how these lenses performed, I think I will start looking at that area, and then I'll report back here to see what the findings are. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.